can also do this. It sometimes gives me a rosier light.
Yeah, looks good. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Ledwell, and this is The Inspiration Show. Today on the show, I have a special guest of mine who is a very good friend and who I was just hanging out with recently. She's released a new book called Downsizing the Silver Tsunami, which is going to be awesome, talking about, how to clear the clutter when we get a little older and be able to clear some space for new things to come in. But before I introduce my special guest, I just want to remind you that after the show's over, don't forget to click the link below this video so you can download the free ebook version of my best-selling book, Never in Your Wildest Dreams. So please let me introduce my special guest and friend, Sharon McGrill. How are you, Sharon?
I am awesome. I made a big pot of chicken soup and released a book.
Yeah. It's like birthing a child, kind of. So you are the founder of the Betty Brigade, and you perform an amazing service for people. So for those people who don't know who you are, I know that you've been on the show once before. What is the Betty Brigade, and how did you get into doing this kind of work and writing the book?
Well, we could talk about that for hours, but it would take some alcohol. So we're just going to go with the short version.
Yeah.
So I started my company 16 years ago, and we specialize in relocation, organizing, and just helping people figure out what to keep and what not to keep.
Right. So is there a specific age group that you look at when you're doing this, or that are your customers?
Well, we work with all different folks, but the book that I just wrote is kind of geared towards seniors and their adult children when somebody is downsizing a home and trying to figure out where does all the stuff go.
Right. So I can imagine, especially if someone's lived in a home for like 30 years or 40 years, depending, on the person, that there must be a lot of, things to clear. So where do you even start with a job like that?
Well, a lot of things to clear is typically an understatement, and uh, and so 50 years of stuff is way different than 10 years of stuff, and
Mm.
and so where do we start? Well, we basically start with what does the client love, what do they want to keep, and we start tagging those items, and then also grabbing the low hanging fruit, the things that are broken, the things that really do not belong in the move, like trash, recycling, um, old paint, things
Right.
like that are in every household.
Right. So is there a system that people can, even start thinking about? If they're looking at this massive mountain in front of them, which can be exceptionally overwhelming, where do they So is there a system that they can actually go to?
There is a system, and so we that's what we wrote about in the book, and
Right.
here it is. It's called Downsizing the Silver Tsunami, and super excited about it. And it kind of walks people through, like, most people have never hired an estate seller for their home. And not all estate sellers are created equally. Most people have never hired a professional mover if they're, over 40 years old. And so they don't know, because, when you're under 40, you maybe don't have the money and you just pay your friends with beer and pizza to move you.
Good
So
friends.
so those are the kinds of things we kind of walk everyone through about, like, what is important about hiring a good real estate agent, why it's important to have a trust or a will, because we see so many family squabbles, things that people argue about over money that it's just not necessary and it can be avoided, things like that. And we break it all down in the book in ways, in a way that you can read it, anybody can read it and understand it, and you know it's not in language that feels hard or difficult to understand.
Right. And so I like the sound of this, because it's not just about clearing stuff up, but it's about really getting your affairs in order, so that the next chapter of your life is really, you can go through with ease and grace, because downsizing can be just a weight off your shoulders,
Yes, it can be. And it's not just for seniors. Like lots of folks are the whole tiny home movement is something that is sweeping the globe. And so, what do you do when you want to live in a tiny home? Well, you have to downsize.
Right. And so, is there a way that, or a lot of stuff, is it sellable? Like, are those kind of things, available? Like those kind of services available to people as well?
Yes. So not every household is has lots of things that can be sold, but some people who have been in their homes for years and years have a lot that does have value. And so it's good to have somebody who can walk through and kind of understand, well, this can be sold and this really should just be donated. And having a professional do that is a big part of how we work. Um, so here's the thing. We always have people in every family walk through a house and say, well, this is, you know, this this is super valuable, and it's not really that valuable. Just because it's listed on eBay for $500 doesn't mean that that's what it will sell for. So
Mm,
you really want to make sure that you're looking at what is the sold price, not what is the listed price.
right. And so, I mean, that brings up an interesting point because if we, sometimes we'll look at something and it's valuable to us, maybe not valuable to everybody else. So, how do
Right.
we choose, the things that we keep and the things that that we can release?
Right. And so that's a great point, and that's actually where we typically start is what are the things you love that you would be sad if they weren't in your life. And what we see all the time is as we're going through people's homes, we're uncovering things that they've set aside, but if those items had gotten ruined in a fire or a flood, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And so what we're doing is saying, what are the things that you know that you keep out and that you love? And we're seeing this with a little bit with Marie Kondo and her tidying up show, and she's using the term spark joy, and we use the term, what are the things you love? Um, and it's the same thing. Um, if you look at something and it just fills up your heart, then you should keep it. And I will also say that not everything in your household will fill up your heart.
Yeah. Because it can really unnecessarily fill up your new place.
Ye That is exactly right, Natalie.
Yeah. Well, actually, I have friends who lost their home in the recent Malibu fires here
Mhm.
in California. And what was interesting was that the biggest thing that they struggled with was their how they connected their identity with their stuff.
Mhm.
So if I don't have this stuff and it's taken me all these years to be able to collect all of this, then who am I without this? So it sounds like having these particular questions that you can ask, because like you said, if you lost it in a flood or a fire, would that be the worst case scenario? Would that really be awful? But then being able to go through that process is really interesting. Okay, so tell me, can you share some stories like of people that you've worked with that you've been able to, really
I got a lot of
you
stories.
got a lot of stories? Share some stories with us, of people that have really, because, I mean, I've done the same thing when I moved from Australia to the US. I had to go through a whole process of, well, have I used this in the last 12 months? Am I ever going to use it again? Is it worth shipping over to the US? And at first it was difficult, but then it started to get real easy after a while because I kind of got into the swing of things. So what are some of the experiences or things that you've seen with people that you've worked with?
Well, everybody approaches it differently. And when it's directly your stuff, it's much, much harder to do. And so we always recommend that you have a friend or a professional do this with you because they're not attached and they're going to look at that and say, really, you're keeping that? Or you have 30 of those. Do you really need 31? And those are the kinds of things that a neutral party will tell you, especially if it's really a good friend, somebody who's not going to enable you to keep all your stuff.
Yeah.
So there's that. Um, but There's also savers. And so I'm going to tell you about a lady who we're working with currently right now. She's a hoarder, and she has a 5-bedroom house that she is using as a storage unit. 5-bedroom house. It's
Mm,
probably about a 4,000 square foot house. It's quite big. And she has filled it up. She no longer lives there. She moved to a condo. And she also has 3 additional storage units on top of the house. And she is struggling to let go of things. And the stuff in the house will not fit in her new condo. She has filled up her condo so that it is a little bit overfull, but it's not to hoarding capacity yet. But she keeps looking at it and thinking, well, there's more room here. But what's been really interesting about working with her is that before we started working with her, her daughters, she has 2 daughters that are adults, and the daughters had stopped talking to her completely. And then about a week after we started working with her, one daughter kind of came back around, and now both daughters are back in her life. Um, and the daughters were not even allowing their children, the grandchildren, to see grandma, because grandma, every time she saw grandkids, would hand the grandchildren stuff. And the
mm,
daughters were like, "Look, you can't send your stuff to my house." Now,
right.
what has been interesting is that I was able to have a conversation and say to the hoarder, look, your daughter, her love language is service. She wants to help you. And the hoarder's love language, her love language is gifts.
Right.
And so when I explained that to these 2 adult women, it suddenly became very clear how they could more easily work together, and that the daughter was no longer resisting her all of her mother's gifts because she realized that that's how mom expresses her love.
Mm,
So it is a process, and does it happen overnight? Not usually.
right.
um, but we do sometimes work with folks who have recently passed, and we help clear out those estates, and those actually go quite quickly.
Right. Yeah, because I can imagine there, even my mom, like she's in her 80s now, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to save this to give this to you," and I'm like, "Okay, let's. This is a bit of a morbid conversation here." But again, it's like trying to keep everything like you're earmarking certain things to pass down,
Mhm.
but everything else you can kind of release. But when it comes to the hoarding situation, that's more than just a can't release stuff. That's obviously something deeper. Do you work with people on that level as well?
We do.
Yeah.
And when we're working with an active hoarder inside a hoarding situation, then we do ask that they are in therapy. And we have therapists we can recommend that will. We have some locally here in Michigan, but we also have some remotely that can work with the client on their phone or on an iPad or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Because that sounds like it's a much bigger issue as
It
well.
is.
Yeah.
It
So
is.
let's say that someone's watching the show right now and they're like, okay, I do need to tidy things up. Like, maybe things are getting a little out of control. And I mean, I try and spring clean at least once a year. And I've actually just moved into a new condo. So there was nothing like doing that and going, yep, no, 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 I can get all of that out. But
Mhm.
what's some advice that you give to people who are like, okay, let's say it's, you're doing a bit of spring cleaning. What
Mhm.
are there particular rules that they can follow and how they can, clear the clutter?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about on a yearly basis, and then I'm going to talk about on a weekly basis
Right.
because I live with a saver. My husband is a saver of things, and I am not.
Hmm.
Imagine that. And so so I understand what it's like to live with somebody who holds on to too many things. So on a yearly basis, I'm going through those storage areas, going through the areas that do get filled up, like garages, attics, basements, back closets, those areas that get jammed up, and taking a look and seeing, have they been damaged by heat or cold or rodents or bugs? Like, because sometimes that happens. So you can let those things go if they're getting damaged, especially like when folks store things in their attics that don't have a lot of insulation. The heat and the cold and the heat and the cold makes paper very brittle, and it
Mm.
just turns into dust. So those are the kinds of things that we really kind of caution people on. So going through those areas once a year is really an important step. Now, on a more regular basis, and this is something we do in our household, we clear the clutter weekly. Because we're both of us are very, very busy. Things build up in the living room, the dining room, the kitchen. I mean, the dishes get done every day, and we do have a cleaning service come in every couple weeks to clean. But the clutter builds up: shoes, coats, whatnot. I leave my earrings around, that kind of thing. So once a week, every Sunday, we reset the house. And what that means is we take a couple of hours to put everything back in its home and figure out what we need for the following week, and kind of put that in places where we can easily get to it so that we're not searching for it.
Right. And I think that's the trick, right? Just staying on top of it. Like even when I did the move, and I'd been in my apartment for 5 years, rather than doing it all on one day, I'm like, right, today I'm going to do this room. So I was able to go through one room, clear everything out, pack everything else. So it wasn't like it was a monumental, thing that I had to do. It was just, I was able to break it up so that it was, a little bit more manageable. But I agree, like doing it on a weekly basis means that it doesn't get to that point where you're like, oh, this is a big job. I need to sort out. So,
Right.
so who are the people that you think will benefit the most from downsizing the Silver Tsunami?
Well, it's the baby boomers and their kids. The baby boomers, because they may or may not be able to stay in their homes, and if they are in that category of "you're taking me out of my house feet first," um, that's okay, but you still have to clear the clutter because you can't have trip hazards. You may have to put in grab bars. You may have to put in a chair lift to get up and down the stairs. And being able to invite vendors in to install those things is an important part of staying safe in your home and being able to continue to maintain your lifestyle and maintain your home. If your home is kind of falling down around your ears, then there's a problem.
Right.
And then their adult children, absolutely, because if the kids start going through stuff with mom and dad, then it's not all left to the end. And mom and dad get to actually tell those stories to the kids about the history of, this particular vase or that particular book or things like that, that really do mean something to the parents. And then the kids can then take those stories and pass them down. What ends up happening is when those stories don't get told, then then it just becomes things, and
Mm.
everything gets dispersed in a way that doesn't feel like it honors the person who passed away.
Yeah, I love that. Why not make it like a family activity where you can
Mhm.
really get to, learn more about your parents as well. I love that.
Yeah.
So, Sharon, where can we send people to connect with you and get their hands on the book?
Well, the easiest place would be our website, which is just bettybrigade.com. And right on the homepage, right front and center, is information about the book. So we made it really easy for folks to find.
Wonderful. Well, darling, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
It's a pleasure chatting with you. And I don't know if your listeners know this, but you are a heck of a karaoke singer.
Thank you.
That was
Yeah,
really a fun night.
we had a very fun night. It was awesome. Well, thanks again, Sharon. So great chatting to you. And guys, I encourage you to please share this video. Let's get the word out by clicking the Facebook and the Twitter share buttons on this page. Now, you can click either the banner to the side or the link below this video to go directly through to Sharon's website. And after all that is done, don't forget to click the link below that so that you can download the free book version of my best-selling book, Never in Your Wildest Dreams. So until next time, remember to live large, choose courageously, and love without limits. We'll see you soon.